You know, I don't think I've ever done Halls of Injustice in the knowledge that the person I'm covering is a minor when they committed the crime and a minor when they receive a sentence that is truly justifiable. Usually this is called the Halls of Injustice, isn't it? This video may well be one of the very few times where I actually get to say welcome to the Halls of Justice. That being said, there may well be some that believe, because of the age of the individual, perhaps some mental health concerns. Or perhaps they didn't know any better. Or perhaps they're innocent. The footage of the crime they committed, from a camera within the home they resided, is in the public space, and will be shown partially in this video. There is therefore no version of this where the person we're going to cover today is innocent. Well, isn't this just fantastic? Hello everyone, welcome to the Halls of Justice. Today we welcome inmate number, and at this point it doesn't really matter, to the ISO cubes. Their name is Carly Gregg. They are going to be here for what may well feel like an eternity to them, because the opportunity and option of rehabilitation is not an option on the table. The crime they committed is a truly heinous crime, one that involved a small modicum of thought, but was done also to show off to the friends, some of whom I can imagine are in trouble themselves. I can also imagine they won't want much to do with Carly Gregg for the remainder of her years, thereby making her life one of absolutely wasted potential. Ordinarily, when a child commits a crime as heinous as the one we're going to be discussing today, you blame the parents. In this you can't, because the crime committed was against the parent. Ungrateful, horrifying, disgusting, diabolical, deceitful, unkind, unjust are very good ways, apt ways in fact, of simplifying massively what she has done. Justice has been served. So we're going to start this by telling you a little bit about who she is, before we delve into the crime she committed. At the time the crimes were committed by Carly Gregg, she was 14 years old. She lived at home with her mother and her stepfather. Her mother was a mathematics teacher. Carly Gregg is from the state of Mississippi, and that is the extent of the knowledge we have about who she is. A lot of what she is tied directly in to the crimes she committed. This does include some video. Disclaimer, I am going to show some footage, but it will not be the part where the crime was committed. The crime she committed against her mother, Ashley Smiley, in the family home. Hello everyone, Future Meg here. I did manage to eventually find something about Carly's past. This was not Carly's first run-in with the law, with the crime she committed that we're discussing today. According to her stepfather, Carly had previously been sent to an alternative school for bringing a Swiss Army knife to class. She was reprimanded for taking pictures of a teacher's answer sheet, even though she objectively is an overachieving student. When she was 13, she scored a 30 on the ACT. I don't know what that means. Her stepfather also pointed out that she was only calculated when it came to her boyfriends, but was mostly a sweet little girl to him and her mother. Punishment spurred from aforementioned incidents, but he never saw her become violent, enraged or angry. The emotion they most associated with her was sadness. Quote, there were not really any problems other than, I think at times, she was depressed. You know, she's a teenage girl, maybe she would get emotional some, but we got her to a clinic in Madison and let her talk to a therapist. The therapist put her on anxiety and depression medications. It was around this time other substances started making their way into her life. The stepfather attributed much of what she then started taking to her biological father because he exposed her to it and sometimes consumed substances around her. She and her mother had a fractured relationship. This started when Ashley started taking her phone away as a form of punishment. This would include iPod or iPad taken away because she would log into social media and contact her friends. I hope this information provides a little additional context, although let's face it, much of what I've just discussed sounds like typical teenage angst. On March the 19th, 2024, Ashley, Carly got ready for their day. After Ashley had made tea and left with Carly to go to school, her husband left a few minutes later to go to his workplace as a physical therapist, which is 5 miles away from the family's Brandon home. Both Ashley and Carly made it home around 3:54 p.m. before Heath finished work. He texted his wife, Ashley, to plan for going to the grocery store, plans later rescinded, and a message at 4:15 in the afternoon went to Heath reading, "Are you almost home? honey. At that point, Heath believed that that message, while not totally far away from what his wife would send, was not what she would typically send him. But that was something later discussed at trial. At 5:03 or 17:03, 5:03 p.m, Heath got home. Camera footage from the garage presented to court showed him getting out of his truck and walking into the family home. Gunshots were then heard, and Heath was shot in the shoulder. His trapezoid was damaged, but he did immediately wrestle the gun away from the person holding it. The person in question was Carly Gregg. She was at that point screaming, acting terrified, which led him to believe there was an intruder in the property. Carly ran out of the back door and could be seen on the camera leaving the scene with an unidentified person following her. Heath then looked around the rest of the home and found Ashley dead from 3 gunshot wounds to the head. He called 911 and officers were dispatched to the home. Shortly after, Carly was found sitting in a field and was taken into custody without incident. Now initially the police were, while they had Carly being a bit of a dick to Heath, he offered on the 20th or 21st of March to give the police footage from the garage camera because they were trying to clamp down on him. They tried to threaten him with charges of witness tampering. They held his license for several days and would not return it. Eventually a separate camera was found. This camera was located in the refrigerator. Heath did give consent to the police to search that camera. Many articles like to point out that in this, the family were a gun-friendly home, including the .357 Magnum. They also had unloaded shotguns, unloaded ARs kept inside a closet, along with a Glock locked in a safe and a BB gun somewhere inside the house as well. The reason for the .357 existing was because Carly's mother was terrified of her ex-husband and Carly's biological father, so this gun was stored in a cubby underneath Ashley's side of the bed. Something which Heath pointed out in court later on was that Carly never showed an interest in guns. This is the part where a piece of key footage is relevant. That footage shows Carly in the house on the day of the crime committed against her mother, where she is in the kitchen and then leaves. You hear some sounds, which you won't be hearing in this video, and then she goes back into the kitchen and starts perusing her phone. Clip included now. The context that is important. One of Carly's friends had told Carly's mother that Carly had started smoking weed. Several times a week she was smoking marijuana, and her mother was not happy, so she was searching Carly's room. She found vape pens and other paraphernalia. Carly lashed out, and Carly decided the best way to do that was to take her mother out of the world entirely. Carly was charged with murder, attempted murder, and tampering with evidence. The murder charge being related to her mother, the attempted murder of her stepfather, and tampering with evidence for sending text messages on her mother's phone to her stepfather, acting as if she was her mother. The state of Mississippi takes these charges very seriously. Depending on the severity of it, capital murder, for example, is death or life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This is important knowledge, and I want you to be aware of it before we go into the trial itself. We're going to begin this part by pointing out that the prosecution had offered Carly Gregg a deal. The deal on the table was 40 years in prison, after which she could in fact have parole. The evidence on the table with the deal, the evidence which was insurmountable, the evidence which, by the way, conclusively proved she was guilty, was a very charitable gift on the table for her. This deal was rejected. It was rejected because her team decided there would be an alternative route sought to limit the kind of future that she would get if she were found guilty. The defense they sought was one of insanity. Quite literally that. Not that the idea of pushing it was insanity, although it could be argued to be that as well, since the evidence, as I earlier stated, was pretty damn conclusive, especially when you compound with a number of psychiatric evaluations and the fact that when she committed the crime, her first thought upon texting her stepfather was to invite a friend over who she fled the scene with to look at the body. That person became a star witness. Their name is not public knowledge, so no, we will not be sharing that. The prosecution portrayed Carly as someone leading a double life. The second life, one of drugs, burner phones, and excess, and the family life falling apart because of her double life and all the excesses within it. The trial itself lasted for 5 days. Gregg's defense attorney used a doctor called Dr. Andrew Clark, who is a child and adolescent psychiatrist based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to evaluate her. So to try and lend credence to this mental health crisis that he claimed she suffered from, they asked, Dr. Clark, based on your experience, expertise and evaluation of Carly, do you believe Carly was able to understand the nature of her conduct and appreciate the difference between right and wrong at the time of the incident occurring on the 19th of March? With the doctor replying, I don't think so. Essentially, they're pushing for diminished responsibility in case it wasn't obvious enough. Dr. Andrew Clark also testified and discussed the mental health crisis along with her medications and hearing voices and having dissociative problems. Quote, and then her mother finds out she's smoking marijuana. For Carly in particular, she so cared about her mother's approval, so for her, this was a crisis. She was having mood issues, eating disorder issues, cutting herself, hearing voices, sleeping difficulty, all leading up to January 2024. Prosecutors presented a journal to the jury, in which Carly kept a written list of 5 beliefs, including, there is no God, it's okay to be evil, and you don't need family. This was evaluated by psychiatrists, forensic psychiatrists, and they considered it deeply concerning. The defense team argued the journals painted a picture of a mentally unwell child who had repeatedly detailed just how much she was struggling. Just in case anyone's curious what medication she was on, it was later discovered to be Lexapro and Zoloft, both of which are used to treat mood disorders. Insert obligatory, don't be pedantic in this moment, I'm citing an article, don't be that person. Heath Smiley, Carly's stepfather, did testify in court. He also admitted that he still cares immensely about her, but he still had to do this. He had no choice in the matter. Along with the friend who had told her mother about what she had been doing. Now, the state itself had stated that Carly Gregg did not meet the minimum requirements to be deemed criminally insane. Their expert witness, psychiatrist Dr. Jason Pickett, claimed Gregg was not insane when she shot her mother and knew what her actions would do. She had narcissistic tendencies and her actions were diabolical, at the end of which the jury was sent away to deliberate. It took them 2 hours to do that, and it took them only 1 more hour to deliberate on the sentencing. That's where we're going next, and we have video for that.
Proper form. Verdict of the jury is count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment. Count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, guilty of attempted murder as charged in the indictment. Count 3. We, the jury, find the defendant, Carly Madison Gregg, guilty of tampering with evidence as charged in the indictment.
Now, the next part of this trial bit, this whole thing, procedure-wise, the judge has to confirm the verdict with every single member of the jury for every single individual charge, right? During which it regularly pans back to Carly, who is then increasing the tears. Now, that could either be consequence actually finally hitting her or crocodile tears. I'm more inclined to believe the latter. Based on what we have learned, I do not believe she possesses the natural emotional range to genuinely experience remorse. But that is just an opinion.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, with you having returned a verdict of guilty in count 1 and count 2 of the indictment, we'll now proceed to the sentencing phase of the trial. State of Mississippi may call its first witness.
Carly Gregg received a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. She is 15 years old and will spend the remainder of that life behind bars. She also got an additional 10 years for tampering with evidence. I'm sure there are some who are going to believe that somebody somewhere has failed her. That won't be me. For whatever reason, which was never truly fleshed out in court by Carly herself, she took it upon herself to end her mother's life. The sentence is life, because I don't believe in the death penalty. Therefore, the sentence is right. Carly Gregg's team are going to be appealing the sentence, believing it to be far too severe. I believe, had she taken the deal, there would have been a possibility at the age of 55 that she could have in fact seen the outside of a prison cell and lived within a society where people would have forgotten who she is. She'll be forgotten, eventually, but she will for the time being be remembered for taking away one of the most important people in her life, because she felt she had the right to decide who got to live and die, for whatever reason she thought was correct, all of which is wrong.